So we're going to talk about bias binding. Now we're going to make our own bias binding. So the key points to bias binding is that it is cut on the cross of the material and it goes around corners. So that's the key points to remember. So Starbark, which is here. So Starbark, so this is satin bound. No, this is satin bias binding. So it's got a single fold, that's what that means. So that's open, and then you've got a single fold, and you can buy double fold, which is two fold. So what happens with bias binding is that it's cut on the cross material, which I've said, but I'm going to show you that in a minute because we're going to cut our own, and it does go around corners. Now it does look like ribbon, but let me assure you it is not. Ribbon is cut on a straight grain of the fabric and has no stretch in it, so it doesn't go around corners, and if you try it'll wrinkle up, so it's not ribbon. So we'll probably come back to that in a minute. So what we're going to do first of all, if we want to make bias binding we need to cut on the cross, but if I've just got a little piece of material cut, how do I know where the straight grain is and where the stretch, the cross grain is, so where the bias grain is? So what you need to do is you need to pull your material. So if I grab this material and if I pull it across and keep pulling it, almost like in a circle, because you're trying to find the diagonal. So can you see there, it's really stretchy? So I can stretch and move that. Whereas if I go back to here, it's not very stretchy at all. So I've tried here and I've tried across here. So if I try the top as well, so that to me feels like it's got a little bit of stretching. Diagonal there has got a lot of stretching, and here has got not much stretching at all. So what I'm thinking then is that this is the straight grain, this is the cross grain, and then this is the bias. Okay, so I'm going to turn it this way. So the cross grain is going across the fabric, the straight grain is running down the fabric, and the bias is running across diagonally. So I've cut a square of material that's 30 by 30, just so it's easier. So if you've got your material, just measure 30 up and 30 across, because our sample pieces are 20, 25. So just 30 centimetres square, so that we can work out by stretching it and moving about where the diagonal is. So I've figured out then that this is the straight grain and this is the cross grain. Now the bias actually sits at 45 degrees. So I'm going to get my tape measure. I'm going to get my chalk, but you might not see the chalk, so if you don't, I will swap to a pencil. I'll use my pencil. So we've got straight grain across there. So if you use your chalk, it'll be better because you're working on material. You should never use pencil on a material. So I'm going across, I'm just drawing a line across. So that's my cross grain. And then down is my straight grain. So cross grain, straight grain, and now I need to, so that is a 90-degree angle. So that there is a 90-degree angle. So what we're looking for is a 45-degree angle. Now, if you haven't got anything that will tell you where the 45-degree angle is, you're not going to go far wrong by estimating the middle point. So I'm going to say that that is my middle point. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my tape measure. Now my piece is 25. So I'm going to measure from that point, following that 45-degree angle across. So I'm going to get my chalk. And I'm just going to draw that line down. So now I've got my bias grain straight down there, and that's going to be the first edge of my bias binding. So I'm just going to turn it that way so that I can put it across. So I'm just going to follow the line where I've just cut. Lost it in the pattern. So there you go. So you can see now that this is your diagonal. I'm just going to put one to one side, and now I'm going to measure inwards. So bias binding is folded 4 times when you put it on. So I'm just going to go back to this strip. So you have, it's open. So this is the size that you need. So this is, when you buy in, this is the size that's measured. So that is the width. Okay? So what happens is it encases your seam. So it's folded once and then it's folded twice. So that is your finished length, which is 1/4 of this measurement. Now I'm just going to tell you that again. I'm going to cut that in half so that you can see. So if this is open, so that's it open, and that's my starting width. Then we are going to single fold, and then we're going to go for a double fold because the seam will sit in here. So we're going to go for a double fold. I'm going to press that in place. So can you see what I was saying? That is 1/4 of that measurement. So whatever you want your finished width to be on your garment, so the finished width of this one is about 1 centimetre. So if you measure how you want your edge to be finished, so if that's 1 centimetre, what you want to be cutting out first is 4 times that width. So you want 4 centimetres. Now, if you wanted your finished edge to be a 2 centimetre border, then your finished width would be 4 times 2, which would be 8. So you would start off with an 8 centimetre ribbon. So what we're going to do, I want mine to be 1 centimetre. So I'm going to start off by measuring 4 centimetres up. So there's a 4 centimetre there. I'm putting my 4 centimetre on the edge that we've just cut, and then I'm going to come up and I'm going to mark where I can see it. So far, and then I'm going to mark up at the edge of my tape measure, and I'm going to do that all the way up, and then the next stage is to cut along that line you've just made. So now I've got a strip cut on the bias. Now can you see how that's stretching? So the next stage is now to create the folds. So you can press it in, and I'm going to show you both ways, but I'm also going to show you these fancy little tools. Of course, there's tools for everything. So this is a bias bind tape maker. So I'm just going to cut a piece of this so I can show you both ways to do it. So I've got two lots of tape, so I'm going to use one piece where I'll just press it in without any fancy tools, because it can always be done without fancy tools. So I'm going to press it in, not all the way to the middle, but just press the edge in. So you've got a bit of a gap in the middle. So that's one side, and then I'm going to bring the other one up too. So it does stretch. Obviously, it's cut on the cross. We've seen that it does stretch. So you don't want to pull it about too much. So when you're ironing it, don't pull it to iron it. Just let it sit and rest, and then just run your iron over the top, because it does want to move about. So I've got that folded in. So I'm just going to run the iron over the top. And then the next stage, because I want a double fold, is I'm going to bring it in again. So the folds are coming together. And that is now pre-pressed, ready to stitch. So that's if you've not got any fancy tool. So perfect, done. So the next one is with the fancy tool. So what you do is, if you see underneath, so that's the top, you've got the pull, and then, that's the underneath, which runs across, and then you've got your pull. So what you do is you feed your tape in. So, let me just show you, there's 4 different sizes that you can get. Well, there's probably more, but standard sizes is 4 different sizes that you can get. So I'll post these up so you can see. So they're the different sizes. So we've got 12, 18, 25. And these measurements are actually the single folded measurements. So you would start with double that. So with this one, it'll be 5 centimetres, double 18, double 12, double 6. Okay? So because I cut 4, I'm going to actually go with the 5, because that's the closest one to it. So I'll just get that right under the camera so you can see. I'm going to feed my material into the side, Now sometimes it won't go, so you can use a pin or you can use an awl and you can just feed it through so it starts to come through. So then what I do, I just want to line it up. So now I would just get it through, get it lined up. So you want it nice and straight, obviously, because this one is a little bit bigger. Got it lined up. I'm just going to press up to that point there. And then I'm going to put a pin in the end. Now that will stop it from moving, so pinning into the ironing board, and that'll stop it from moving. So I'm just going to move that up now out of shot so you can't see it, but that's all it is. It's pinned in at that side. Now I'm going to take this loop, this handle, I'm going to pull it back, and then what happens is you get your iron and you run your iron over, so you pull it slightly, and can you see the tape forming? So the tape is forming, so it's folding it for you, and you're just running it up. So you're just following it with your iron, basically. So pulling it, following it with your iron, pulling it, following it with your iron. And with that pin there, it's not moving. There you go. So that's your tool. So I don't know if I can hold it up without you seeing it. So anyway, it just, at the end, it does just run off and run out when your tape is finished. So I'm going to take that pin out at that side. So I've got my single fold now. So that's my fold that I did myself, which is a little bit smaller anyway. And then that one on there. So I'm happy with them both. You can do both, and they both take as long as each other, probably depending on the amount of binding that you're using, will depend if it's easier to use a tape maker or not. So I've got a single fold there. So again, I'm just going to bring the edges up together, so the folded edges together. And I'm going to press that in place. So sometimes it stays, sometimes it'll bounce back, but you've got them in as a guide. So that's your bias binding tape made.